This is What Happened This Week. It is the 24th of March. It's crazy how fast March has been going, but I guess that's sort of what happens when you're working a lot and you're writing and you're doing a podcast twice a week. You just don't even realize that the time is flying. So I'm just appreciative of that. This is a good episode. I did something new. I sort of tried to freeform it a little more than usual because I didn't like how I kept expanding the time. Make sure you're liking, make sure you're subscribing. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, Plan C Podcast, not that hard to find. Follow us on Apple, follow us on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, like on YouTube, all that. Make sure you're following us individually on Instagram, because why not? Check out previous podcasts, and I'm not going to waste too much more time, so let's get into it. And we're back. So today, I'm actually going to try a nice little new format. I've been finding my episodes go, specifically for what happened this week, I find that they go a little long. So rather than using my notes and all that, because I think when I have my notes in front of me, I sort of just go on and on and on and on and on. I think what I'm going to do now is sort of just have my topics and go. Anyway, so first topic is Damian Lillard a top 3 candidate right now? So recording, it is Tuesday night, I guess Wednesday morning now, because it's late. I wanted to record this after the Nets game. They faced the Blazers, Portland Trailblazers. If y'all don't know, that is the team Damian Lillard is on, and Damian Lillard is usually disrespected in the MVP voting. You know, he's a player who doesn't get too much national notoriety just because of where he plays. I think, when you're playing in Portland, your games are going to be later, and straight up, people aren't going to notice your games. And, it's a small market team, so again, you're not going to get too much coverage because teams like the Lakers and the Clippers and the Golden State Warriors are going to get a lot more attention. Anyway, with LeBron and Anthony Davis injured and now Joel Embiid injured, for me, it's like, how can you not include Damian Lillard in the top 3 of MVP voting right now? And the last time I looked, he's still not. You have Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo, all ahead of Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard also has the same odds as James Harden, who, also putting together a very, very nice season. So Damian Lillard, I think he's second in scoring right now. His clutch stats are unbelievable. And if you just look at how the Blazers are doing, they're still competing for a playoff spot, and they've had to deal with injuries and COVID stuff. I mean, and all teams had to deal with COVID stuff, obviously. But, his second best player and third best player, they've missed large amounts of times. And, I know CJ McCollum is back now. But for me, it's like, how is this being ignored for so long? The fact that Lillard is putting his team legitimately on his back. And yeah, you know what? He doesn't have the exact same numbers as Jokic, because Jokic is actually putting up insane fucking numbers. But at the same time, it's like, well, wait. Lillard is literally carrying his team. His clutch numbers are insane, and he just continues to do it on a night-in, night-out basis. The Blazers didn't get the win tonight because my Nets are nice. But it's still just kind of baffling that players who traditionally should not get votes because they've missed so much time are still ahead of him in the odds voting. or in the odds for MVP. And again, I think it's a product of the MVP voters, and they just love a narrative. Best player on the best team. Well, there's not one of those this year, so why don't we give it to James Harden? Just kidding. People, MVP voters don't like when you mention that because they don't like how James plays, even though he is technically the best player on the best team right now. But I'm not going to get into it. I still think they should give it to Dame. Or, I mean, maybe don't even like give it to him, but just more consideration. Like, come on now. Sticking with basketball for this next one, I wanted to talk about how Steve Nash has really navigated this Nets season and how, he's sort of the perfect guy for the job. You want to look back at everything that sort of happened with the Nets. And, Kyrie literally went AWOL for a while there. Kevin Durant has missed a lot of time. He's had to use so many different lineups just because of big trades and sort of COVID absences and injuries. And I think when you're factoring that all together, you need to have a very calm demeanor and you need to sort of have a level head. And I think Steve Nash has had that this year. And that's sort of who he is. He's also got this amazing, amazing staff around him. So it's like, okay, that sort of makes sense as to why, the X's and O's work for a first-time head coach because, he has Mike D'Antoni and Jacques Vaughn and a bunch of other just truly great other leaders around him. But it's still to the point where Steve is able to still make his own footprint on the team, and it's now coming to a point where it's like, oh wow, these decisions that Steve is making, they're really impactful. For instance, giving Nicholas Claxton more minutes over DeAndre Jordan. I know that was maybe pretty obvious for a lot of people, but it still just shows that, hey, you know what? This could have been such a disaster with somebody else and their temperament taking it. But Steve has been so patient and just remained level-headed. And again, with the coming and going faces, whether it was the James Harden trade or bringing in new people like Bruce Brown and Blake Griffin coming in, you're clearly seeing that players are buying into their roles. And when you're buying into your roles and each part of the team, it's really obvious to see that, like, oh, you know what? Maybe what he is saying is, again, the players are buying in, and that's not an easy thing to do. We've seen in the past when players have easily been like, nah, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm good. But that's not the case here. And again, you've had Kyrie Irving miss so much time. Kevin Durant miss so much time. And the Nets are in second for the East. Like, come on, this is getting a little ridiculous. I'm not saying he should win Coach of the Year, but maybe I am. I don't know why it's not being talked about more. This has been a really, really good season for Steve, and to navigate COVID, to navigate injuries, to navigate these big trades, to navigate Kyrie Irving just being like, I'm gonna fuck off for a little bit. And I mean that in the most respectful way, because Kyrie had to do what he had to do, and to be like, you know what, we're taking it all in stride. We're gonna keep moving. We all right. I don't know. Not too many coaches could have done that. Could have put aside their pride and been like, you know what, we're good. We got this. We got this on lock. It's going to be all right. And that's why I think Steve Nash has been the perfect head coach for this NBA team. Because again, like, his demeanor is just so chill. He's just a chill guy. And it's sort of I don't want to say go with the flow mentality, but it's very much a relaxed and a certain stoicism to him, you know? All right, my last little bit here as I continue is you know what? It's going to be an all NBA show today because you know, I could talk about free agency in the NFL and I could talk about baseball and spring training, but I don't want to. It's pretty late and I got to go to bed. So, I'm just going to talk about what I prepared. And yes, I have prepared something because I didn't want to go into this completely blind because, you know, who wants to do that? Anyway, I'm going to talk about how Chris Paul is the best floor raiser of the past 20 years in the NBA. And I am actually writing an article about this, so, you know, that's my little helpy help. So, you know, CP3 came into the league in the 2004 draft. He was the 4th overall pick by the Hornets. They were trash that year. They were trash. I think they only won like 18 games. And within 2 years, has them contending after, you know, turning the franchise around. You have him throwing passes to players like David West and Peja Stojakovic. If you don't know deep basketball like that, I mean, it's not even that deep, but like, these aren't amazing players, straight up. You know, and I know he's played with, you know, Blake Griffin and James Harden and all, but not for extended periods of time. Anyway, so moving on, after he gets traded to the Clippers, turns them into an immediate contender and elevates the play of DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin, like literally turns them into all NBA / all-stars. All NBA players. I felt that was clear, but, you know, for people who don't know. And he's racking up assists, racking up all these steals, scoring a bunch of points. And unfortunately, he just gets injured in times, specifically with the Clippers, in times where it could have all culminated in a championship. But sadly, you know, it didn't. And you look at the stats, and I think his top 5 assist recipients are, it's like Blake Griffin, David West, JJ Redick, DeAndre Jordan, and Peja. Like, come on. Like, what? And you know, there's been times where he's been washed up, or I'm sorry, quote, washed up. You know, that was just people looking at his salary cap hit and being like, oh, you know, he's so injury prone. He can't do it anymore. Look at the last 2 seasons. In Oklahoma City last year, people expected him to absolutely crash and burn. But no, he didn't. They were expected to be a terrible, terrible team, and he elevated the team to a playoff spot. Same thing goes with the Phoenix Suns. People saw them. They're like, oh, CP3, he ain't gonna do shit this year. Ha ha ha! They're contending! They're a top 4 seed in the West right now. And I know his numbers aren't quite what they used to be, but they're still competing at a high level. And that's sort of the Chris Paul effect, because you get him to buy in, and all the young players are like, oh man, Chris Paul is buying in? Like, shit. Better lock up, lock down, lock, load, explode. And I think when you have that, and especially now that, you know, LeBron is down and all that, and again, the Suns are a 2 seed. The Suns are a 2 seed. Who the fuck saw that coming? Chris Paul repeatedly raises the floor. So when I say floor, I mean like the lowest possible level of play. He raises the floor of his teammates and of the franchise. And, you know, now you have the Thunder, who, again, don't have Chris Paul anymore, but are still, they're competing. They're competing. And I know they're not in the playoffs right now or anything, but you just got to give credit where credit is due. And impacts on players like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you know, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, they're so apparent. And I just think that Chris Paul really gives his all, unlike anyone else in the NBA, even LeBron James. Because when LeBron went to the Lakers and had all that young talent around him, he was like, I'm good. We're gonna miss the playoffs this one season. All right, this has been What Happened This Week. Different type of episode. Tried to do it a little more free form. Still had my 3 topics and all. But if you haven't already, make sure you're liking, you're sharing, you're subscribing. Make sure you're checking out previous podcasts. We very much appreciate your listens. Could be some fun stuff coming up. We have toyed with the idea of merch. So I don't know if that's going to be a thing. But, because with merchandise, you really need people to buy in, literally. So we'll see if that happens. I'm not sure if it will. Anyway, make sure you're liking, make sure you're subscribing, make sure you're following. Check out previous podcasts. We have lots of interviews up. We have lots of interviews coming up. And we just appreciate y'all showing your support. So anyway, hope you're having a lovely, lovely Wednesday, or whatever day you're listening to this. Day, night, morning, evening, whenever it is. Hope you're having a good one, and make sure you stay safe. Have a good one, y'all.